Morning, everybody. Happy day 3 of Operation Catch and Kill Enormous Hairy Spiders that can run at 3 feet per second. I'm a bit discombobulated because I had to murder one just before I came on air. I hope his family don't come out and get revenge. Now, welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by Kate Towey, the founder of Mind, Body and Scrolls, a platform for parents and carers to challenge perceptions about managing smart devices for their children. Morning, Kate.
Hi, how are you doing? Hope that spider doesn't get you this morning then.
There'll be another one, I'm sure. They'll be lurking somewhere. Now, we're going to discuss your sort of platform a bit later, and also a couple of relevant news stories that hopefully I think will be setting the agenda for the next week. Now, this is the People's Paper Review, everyone. So get into the comments, ask us your questions. We'll do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to put up, hope you are as smart as your phone is. Now, what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on questions about whether the NHS learned from serial killers Harold Shipman and Beverly Allitt, and any possible links between them and the Lucy Letby case. Now, there's more on that in the paper if you're interested, but I want to take us first to page 2, where Department for Education statistics have been published revealing that a quarter of newly qualified teachers left their jobs within 3 years. That's the highest attrition rate in 20 years. And this may resonate with you a bit, Kate, because in the story we've got National Education Union General Secretary Daniel Kebede, who says the decimation of mental health services is putting too much pressure on teachers. And the Campaign for Real Education head, Christopher McGovern, is saying that teaching today is less about passing on knowledge and more about social work and child psychiatry. Now, you've got 2 children at school, Kate. Have you seen, newly qualified teachers coming and going, too much pressure being put on them to do things they're not qualified for?
Yeah, not at my kids' school, but I've got friends who are teachers, and I've got a friend who's quit, a family member who quit being a teacher actually, because the emotional toil was too much, and she felt like she had nothing to give to her family when she got home. She worked in a fairly tough school, but I think all schools have lots of problems, don't they, or challenges with the kids. They're social workers, they're nurses, they're doing so much. So I think it's a really tough job. It's not teaching in its purest sense anymore, is it? They're dealing with so many things, and I guess my interest area, is around phones and tech, and a lot of primary school teachers are probably seeing kids who have been affected by smartphones and social media usage to early in their life, and all the sort of challenges that brings. So yeah, I think it's a really tough
tech at home, perhaps, and then it's going to school and either sleeplessness or seeing things that older siblings maybe that have introduced them to stuff that's perhaps not age appropriate and things like that. What do you think, everybody? Have you sort of witnessed any problems with the teachers? Do you think they're being asked to do too much, or do you think they're just being a bit weak and feeble and need to snap out of it, basically? Maybe, all these teachers that are leaving the jobs are just people who qualified and then changed their minds, decided to do something else. It is possible. That's not, people do change careers. But there is this thing, isn't there? I mean, teachers are increasingly being asked, Kate, to sort of police mobile phone usage at schools. And there's an awful lot of that about schools must do this, schools must do that. And they can't do everything, can they?
No, they absolutely can't do everything. And I think because there's different policies in different schools, that's problematic. And also, teachers have got classes of 30, and, people have got different things going on different days. So I just think it's beyond them. They need, tighter guidelines from the government, maybe to get phones out of schools, because surely eliminating phones out of schools would make part of teaching a little bit easier, or less stressful in parts for teachers. But yeah, I think that they are going to definitely be impacting teachers, because it's going to be taking time to be dealing with people on phones. And the only other thing I think with teachers and phones in schools is that some schools have actually got them where pupils are having to use them, particularly in secondary school. So, for games or apps, or for paying for lunches. So I think that by schools looking at a holistic approach, looking at where they can take phones out from a schooling point of view, that will probably help teachers too.
Yeah, it's. What do you think, everybody? Do you think phones should be taken out of schools? Do you think that they should be banned for children, people under 16 or whatever? Or do you think that, do you have children at school? Do you need to contact them sometimes? Do they need to be on a phone? Would that make your life more difficult if they don't have a phone and they're not able to use it somehow? Get into the comments and let us know. How do you feel about all this? So we've got all this also on page 14, kind of the other end of the child age spectrum, I suppose. There's the actor Idris Elba, who is going to be meeting Keir Starmer today, along with other knife crime campaigners, in what the Prime Minister probably hopes is going to knock winter fuel payments off the news agenda, to discuss how they're going to tackle knife crime. Starmer's asked a coalition of campaigners to Downing Street today for some talks about tackling the root causes, not just the symptoms, not just cracking down or sentencing, or banning knives, but actually talking about what's causing the problems. Okay, we've seen in sort of repeated court cases that a lot of it can be connected, not necessarily caused by, but maybe facilitated by, amplified by social media, what other people in their peer group think of them, live streaming stuff, WhatsApp messages, all sorts of things. I mean, Jacqueline's on there saying there should be a ban on phones in school. Be interesting to know why you thought that, Jacqueline, because they're not learning, she says. But, there are some people, perhaps children who, perhaps they've got parents at home. I'm just trying to think of something now who, if they've got caring responsibilities, as some do, and a parent needs to get hold of them during the school day. Maybe they can't get them through the school office. Maybe there's some other kind of problem. They need to say, look, just don't meet me here, meet me there. There's reasons that a parent might need to get in touch. So I don't know. But if Jacqueline thinks they're not learning anyway. But as I was saying, Kate, social media and phones have been part of what we've seen with some reports of knife crimes and so on. Do you think controlling that sort of forum for communication, I suppose, between children is going to be a bit about part of bringing knife crime down?
Potentially. I think what social media does is normalise some things, and maybe through the images, the videos that have been shared, we become desensitised, don't we? And social media certainly can be guilty of that, of normalising certain behaviours, violent behaviours, sort of uncivic behaviours, and I think that the tech companies, obviously, they look at moderation, and we have to not have this, anything to do with violence or crime glamorized and just made sort of appealing or normal to our young people. So I'd say that ladders up, to the tech companies, to the apps, to moderate this content. So if children aren't consuming it, are they going to be less likely to I don't know, be affected by it, potentially? Yeah.
I mean, one of the arguments that people have about social media usage and that for adults is about freedom of speech, things like WhatsApps. But do children have that same freedom? I don't necessarily think that they always do. I mean, Sean on Twitter says, women just interfering in everything. Johnny says smartphones can be educational. The objective should be to educate children to use smartphones safely. But there's lots of things, Johnny, that adults use and know about, maybe, and don't always use safely, like, let's say, alcohol. But you don't educate children how to use it by letting them actually drink the stuff. There is a different way of doing it sometimes, isn't there, Kate? What would you say to Johnny?
Yeah, I think, listen, smartphones there'll be some kids who have brilliant behaviours with smartphones and aren't bothered about them. But, a smartphone really is 1% phone and 99% computer. And most children only need to have a phone until they're sort of 14, 15, 16, that calls, that texts, that their parents can get hold of them, that they can make connections with friends still and arrangements so they can have freedoms. But on balance, smartphones really for under 14s, maybe even under 16s, if we really take stock as a society, do they really need them? I would say no. Because also a lot of kids, WhatsApp feels fairly innocuous maybe to a lot of parents, but it's where a lot of issues happen. Children under 13 shouldn't be using it anyway, but it's where a lot of issues happen because they haven't learned digital habits because of their age. to how to conduct themselves. So I think that we need to probably look at, we talked about teachers earlier on. Maybe there's part of the curriculum that needs to also look at educating kids around tech better. But yeah, for me, on balance, I think most kids need a phone and not a smartphone.
Yeah. Well, so let's go into this a bit deeper then. And what do you think, everybody? Do you think that kids do need smartphones? Do you think there's some kind of benefit to it? Or do you think that, like Kate says, it should be something that perhaps they arrive at a little bit more slowly, not all at once, like when they're 8 or something? So let's dig into this a little bit. This Mind, Body and Scroll business, the platform that you set up, Kate, why did you set it up? What does it aim to do?
Do you know what, Susie? I'm a normal, busy working mum. And over the last couple of years, I've just seen, my kids, my son's just started secondary school. My daughter is in year 5 now. And over the last couple of years, I just, thought, watching kids walking to school, head down on their phone, in my bones, it just didn't feel right. And that I didn't want that for my kids. And I kind of realised, my kids' primary school has a really strict phone policy. But I just thought, I don't want this for my kids. And also, it's quite a radical act going through primary school now. I think it's 97% of kids who are 11 have a smartphone. So I just thought, right, I'm not doing that. And I guess I just wanted to share in a non-judgmental, smug way what's working for me, what's not working for us, and share that with other parents on my Instagram, just to try and help people to change the course of sort of history. But I think if we all come together in community, there are lots of layers to phones and social media, but if parents have a bit of agency and we speak up and help each other, I really think we can change things, and kids can it's not part of growing up having a smartphone, and that's what I'd like to change.
Yeah, but it's one of those things, isn't it? I suppose when we were growing up, no one had this. I got my first Ericsson when I was 20 something. And God, I miss it. But there's a bit of nostalgia, I suppose. Some might say that the reason you see children and think it's wrong when they have a smartphone is just nostalgia, perhaps, for your own childhood. And they would argue that it's a vital part of life. You need to get used to it. Children, perhaps, it's all around them anyway, from other children, and you're kind of holding them back almost, and that they're not learning a vital skill. When if you just let them become immersed in it, they learn some of those skills. But then again, was it 97% you said of 11-year-olds?
So, yeah, around that.
Smartphones are £1,000, aren't they? Who gives children £1,000 present and goes, all right, you're 11, do what you like with it?
Yeah, I think a lot of first phones, to be honest, are phones that are old ones that parents have had in the household. Yeah. That goes on a lot. And as to holding them back, listen, kids are you give a kid a device, they're going to figure it out in about 10 seconds. So there's not holding them back. It's delaying. It's just delaying because we're stealing their childhood. For me, when you give a child a smartphone, you're taking away the childhood in some ways, because you're teaching them scrolling, you're teaching them this notion of just, picking up your phone all the time. And adults are addicted, most adults are addicted. So why would we want that for our children when they're 9, 10, 11, Eventually, I agree, kids should have smartphones and we should embrace tech. Smartphones aren't evil, but it's about delaying. For me, delaying until their brains are ready to deal with notifications and messaging, and just delaying is my message.
You're basically feeding them to an algorithm, aren't you? It's not just having the phone; it's the corporations that are on their phone. And once you start, I think there was a study a little while ago, or some research that showed, girls on phones are just fed different stuff to boys on phones. But if you go on a phone as a young girl, you're going to get fed fashion tips, beauty, perhaps body shaming and lots of stuff to start worrying about how you look and how people perceive you. But if you're a young man, you go on a phone and suddenly you're fed violence and knife crime and pornography and different stuff. And the algorithm takes you in different directions that it's not necessarily good to go in at all. Are you kind of talking about making it, I suppose, fashionable for parents to say, no, you're not having one of those phones? Or are you talking about making it illegal and having an actual change to the law?
Both. I think that, ideally, the hard line, there's pragmatic and realistic, right? The realistic bit of me goes, I think we changed the social norm of kids having a smartphone by coming together in communities, in classes. So if your children are in year 5, year 6, speaking and looking at the work of Smartphone Free Childhood and going, which is a really interesting UK body, and going, right, let's do this as a class, because I think when there's just one kid in a class doing it, it's not easy. But my son got through year 6, and a load of his mates didn't have phones, and that not being the odd one out is really, really important. So I think that's the realistic way we're going to do things as parents. What I would really love, and I know a lot of other people would love, is for smartphones to become, have 2 classes of smartphones. So you have a smartphone for under 16s with limited apps, maps, tracking, etc., and then over 16s. So I think I read a study today where there's another body, I think, called Nesta, calling for that. But is that going to happen immediately? Likely not. So I think we have to save ourselves, and I think that's by going in parents.
I think that's what you need, isn't it? Like a daughter phone almost, that you pair with your own. But then you go, right, you're not having that, you're not having that, you're not having that. You can have this. I need to know where you are. You can do this. You can have access to the bank card to pay for your lunch, whatever it might be. But I think a lot of people who object to that are thinking about their own childhood at school and that one kid in the class who didn't have the thing that everybody else had, and remembering how they were bullied, maybe how they bullied that kid themselves, or they were that kid, and thinking, well, let's not have that because they're going to be bullied if they don't have it. Wes says, are these children grown enough to face punitive sanctions like isolation if they're, but they're still too young to understand notifications? Is that the argument, that they can be isolated at school for misbehaving, but they don't understand social media? That seems a bit, I think he's saying that's a bit strange. People say that also that phones are an access for bullies, aren't they? They're a place where paedophiles, where bullies can get to your children when they're at home. I mean, where do you land on that in terms of bullying for not having one?
It's obviously no one wants their kid to be the odd one out, but I think that there are certain things that it is worth talking to your kids about being, what your why you might want to do this, and trying to get them on board. I appreciate a 9-year-old is not going to be like, great, I totally understand this, but honestly, that's where community comes in. That's where being that parent. If you feel like you don't want your kid to have a smartphone, speak up in your class WhatsApp group, speak to other parents, and be that parent who allows other parents to go, actually, I agree. Or, it might not be everyone, but if you can get a gang of you, like 4 or 5 of you, of your child's friends, then they're not going to be isolated. They're not going to be isolated. You're going to do it together, and they'll thank you for it, I think, in years to come.
Yeah, well, what do you think, everybody? What have you done with your children? Are you deciding not to give them smartphones? Are you deciding you should give them smartphones? Get into the comments, let us know. Now, you said, Kate, that your eldest has just started secondary school. So he's got his new blazer on, and he's got his new haircut, and he's got his shiny shoes, and he doesn't have his shiny new smartphone. Does he have anything else instead? How's he taken to it?
Yeah, so he has a Nokia, and he's been fine. He walks to school with some friends, half an hour there, half an hour back. I spoke to the school before he started to ask if he needed a smartphone, and he didn't. He's not the only kid who without a phone or a smartphone in his school. So they're a school where you don't need to have apps. They're not using apps in school that they can't use on a laptop at home. So he's fine, because that's how he's sort of been rocking for the last few months of primary school. I was really pleased last week. A group of them were walking to school. He met a boy, as you do in the beginning of school, who he didn't know before, who's also got a Nokia. So he's not feeling totally alone. I think a lot of parents worry about tracking kids, and I get that. Because Nokia's basic phones, you can't really track your kids. So where we've landed with that is looking at having something like a second-hand smartwatch with all the apps disabled, so you can track your kid. And if you feel the need to, and I get that from a safety point of view, if kids are out and about, and parents want to keep an eye on where they are, and make sure they've not taken any wrong turns. So I think that. You mentioned earlier, alternatives for phones. What we need is some alternatives that have a number of apps and things that make parents feel comfortable, make children feel not completely ostracized or different. It's been fine for us so far.
Yeah. Well, fingers crossed. Anyway, my daughter, who's 8, was thrilled last week when she heard on the news that she sees all kinds of stuff on the news, never mind with smartphones. But there was this Barbie phone, very £99 that had come out, and she went, "Bart must have it." And it was one that was like with apps disabled, and it was friendlier and everything else. But why don't all mobile phone companies? I mean, I would have thought there is a market for them to make the same kind of looking devices as their parents have, that can fit in the same cases, but that somehow or another has a different operating system on, perhaps, and you can just say, well, here's my daughter phone, if you like, and it's going to have these phone numbers on and this, that, and the other, and I'll be able to track it, and all this, and it will work. And the people would pay through the nose for that kind of thing to keep their children safe. I mean, why don't they do it? What do you think?
Well, there are some alternatives, particularly a lot of them sort of are in America at the moment, rather than being able. There's a phone called like the Light phone and things like that, but the price point is pretty eye-watering for a lot of these things at the moment. I do believe that Nokia are working on or soon to launch a new kind of dumb phone. I think we need to rebrand dumb phones as well. It's not really helpful calling them dumb phones, is it? Do we call them smartphones? First phones.
Smarter phones.
Well, yeah.
Smarter phones. So having something that is what the adults have, and say, well, you can't just have a kid's phone because they're like, well, I'm not a baby anymore and I don't want this. You've got to find something that they're going to want. It's the one your parents don't want you to have phone, the smarter phone, the better phone, the more cooler phone in some way.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That otherwise it's going to feel like you're kind of trying to keep something away from them that they would find quite fun. It's like we don't allow children to experiment with sex and drugs, because that is, for when they're older, maybe, but they still find their way to get their hands on it sometimes at a certain point. I mean, you're holding back the tide, aren't you, Kate, to some extent? Your son is going to get to the point where he says, I just want a smartphone, and that's, you're going to have to do it, Mum.
Yeah. What are you Yeah, I mean, God, no, I agree. And listen, and my message is delay. It's not necessarily no. He's not. I'm not trying to make him live in the dark ages. He will get a smartphone, but by my sort of rationale or my methodology is that by the time he gets a phone, his brain will have been through. I want him to get a smartphone probably when he's 14. He was 12 yesterday, and his brain is going to go through lots of developments. His social skills are going to go through lots of developments, and by 14, they're probably more ready to have a device like that. Also, I think about what he's gaining rather than what he's losing. My son is really good at conversation, chit chat, and he's not going to be at a bus stop with his head down in his phone. He's going to talk to people. He's going to have lots of real world experiences. He's going to, not that other kids with smartphones don't, but we're prioritizing, all the sports and clubs and things that he does, so that actually when he gets a smartphone, he's honed some of his other social skills beforehand, because I think that kids are missing out on honing chit chat and real life conversation, maybe because they're doing everything on, WhatsApp.
Well, I'll tell you what, though, is going to be world class at Snake. By the time you hand onto an iPhone. Now, on Twitter, Michael says, it's hard to stop an idea whose time has come. Victor Hugo said that once. On the phones, it's a hard question. Years ago, parents didn't like computer games, but those children who did play them grew up and landed good jobs in the computer industry. I don't think we're all going to land jobs at Apple, nor would we necessarily want one. What do you think, everybody? Are you for and against where do you stand on this? David says, the trouble is with technophobes, it's the job of the parent to make sure their child's using the phone responsibly. Why should all children be held accountable for a few that don't know how to use a phone responsibly? I suppose that's what some parents, in, say, a class or a friendship group would say. They're going to say to you, Kate, well, look, my kids are fine with it. They know, I understand them, and I think they're okay. Whether it's true or not is a different thing. Why should I not let them have a smartphone because, Kate, you don't want your children to have one?
Yeah, no, I take that on board. I think that it's about collective good and the greater good. And quite clearly in society, we have a problem with phones. I mean, adults have a problem with phones, and all the data around kids' mental health and well-being, it ain't great in relation to phone use and social media use, So I think for me, it's probably about taking one for the team and going, it's about the greater good. Great that if your kid knows how to use smartphones and is great with them. I know plenty of people's kids who are. But in a lot of families, it's the biggest source of relational conflict between parents and teenagers. And I just think, I'm not a technophobe at all, but it's about the greater good and actually course correcting society and making, what is a norm now of giving a phone to young kids. Changing that and not making it a norm. And
if we invented smartphones tomorrow, would we make them available to children straight off out the bat? Or is it because they've evolved over time and they just sort of become part of society? They go, hang on, that's, it's a bit like smoking or, I don't know, free internet newspapers, that kind of thing. Would you have done this if you'd seen where it was going to end up? Paul says, children can get addicted to phones easily. People don't know what long-term damage could occur. You're right, Paul, because they're, smartphones, social media, all very, very new, and our brains are still cavemen. We have not evolved. Gary says, my son didn't have a phone until he was 15. He was very computer literate, so when he did get one, he already had a pretty good idea on how to use them. And my daughter's 8, she's year 4. They use Chromebooks at school. They have apps on them. They have lessons about things that you don't put on the internet and things that you don't want online, stuff like that. So when she gets a phone, whenever that is, and I'm with you, I'm inclined to think a brick until she's really past the point where I can't hold off any longer. Hopefully she'd be a bit more savvy. I mean, we were all 25 or 30 or whatever age when we started getting phones, and it was all new and strange to us. And it's going to be a bit different for our children, isn't it? It's going to be an integral part of the thread of society. They should be better at it than we are, shouldn't they?
Yeah, I think that they are better at it, but it doesn't make it right. These things are designed to be sticky, to be intuitive, and they're just because something is a norm. I think that, like you mentioned earlier, lots of things that become societal norms, once we get more evidence, we've realised that wasn't a great idea. Smoking being case in point. So I think that the evidence, and there is certainly, I'd recommend a book called Anxious Generation by a psychologist called Jonathan Haidt. And in there is loads of data around the effects on kids of phones. And so, I think for me, really, it's a no. We've got to reflect as a society and go, something's not right here.
What do your children say? What does your son say or your daughter say?
My son is really, really happy to go along with this because at the moment he's had community, he's had his friends, he's got friends with smartphones, but he's got friends without, so it's not been a problem. Listen, I'm not naive. He's only week 1 into secondary school. I know that there's going to be the pestering at some point, and he will I'm sure come to me around that, but it's an ongoing conversation. I keep on reminding him as well why we're doing this and what the reason is and why we believe it's for the best. My daughter is 9, nearly 10. If I gave her a phone tomorrow, she would love it. She would love it. So what I'm doing with my son is paving the way for her, because I think that the data around girls and social media and smartphones is you know, they have worse outcomes than boys from some of the research I've certainly seen. So yeah, my daughter would love it. They go on devices, my children. You know, they have device time, but we're pretty strict. You know, during the week there's no gaming, there's no TV before school, there's no yeah, we're pretty strict. But you know, every household's got to do what they think is right for them.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, in this household, I'm afraid Danger Mouse first thing in the morning is an immovable object, and I can't seem to get around it. It's just Danger Mouse, Danger Mouse. Now, Lazy says, our son's getting one for his 11th birthday, mainly because he's just started walking to school, and Live 360 tells us where he is. It's a bit of peace of mind. It's what a lot of parents are going to choose. But, you know, there's AirTags, there's smartwatches, there are other things too. But you have to just people have to make their own decisions, won't they? Wes says kids spend the majority of their lives in school, not at home. It's not all on the parents. And as we saw right at the beginning, perhaps too much was on the teachers. Right. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking us through that. Thank you, Kate, for dealing with all those questions. We have managed to find some good news in the world for you. And here it is. Now, we've just finished the Paralympics. The closing ceremony was yesterday, and Britain's disabled athletes did better than the able-bodied ones. Hooray for us. Second in the medal table, just behind China. We got 124 medals, 49 of them gold, all of them even more inspiring than the Olympians, which were pretty inspiring. Now, Kate, none of these people won a medal in texting or having the fastest thumbs. Is this proof, do you think, that if you give young people something else to do, they can still achieve great things?
Yeah, for me, real world stuff is really important. And that might seem like a really obvious thing to say, but having hobbies, having passions that lie outside of smartphones, and it is really important, isn't it? To probably achieve and have an edge on life, maybe. Other kids who don't have smartphones until later, maybe going to have a bit of an edge on life. I don't know, you know, but I think that getting ahead and having hobbies and passions outside of your phone are probably a great thing.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, we just have one viewer there is talking about phones should be banned, but I think generally speaking, anyone who's got something that sets them apart as an adult, that stands you in very, very good stead. And I think just conforming because you're a youngster and because other people are going to judge you, generally speaking, as a parent, that's something you try to encourage your children not to do with everything else. You don't have to wear that. You don't have to do that just because all your friends are. We seem to forget about that with phones a bit. But, you know, non-conformity, please, everybody. But maybe, who knows, maybe there'll be a ban at some point, or someone will decide they can make some money out of a children's phone. That'll be handy, wouldn't it? Children's smartphone. You heard it here first. Right. Thank you, Kate, for taking us through all of those things. Now, everyone out there, if there's anything we haven't covered, if there's anything you think we skipped over or you want to ask, please get in touch. Email me, susie.boniface@mirror.co.uk. The best questions, if you have any thought-provoking things you want to say, we will raise them in a future show. Otherwise, if you're listening on podcast, please leave us a review so other people can find us. Otherwise, we will see you on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda. Until then, everybody, stay safe, take care, tatty bye.